AI is not a replacer. It's an assistant. It's something that will remove the drudgery of repetitive tasks and actually go out and be journalist.
The Signal. You are listening to The Signal.
The Signal.
Cutting through the noise.
You are listening to The Signal.
Welcome to episode 4 of The Signal, a podcast with a global perspective on media, journalism, and technology. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Fergus. One of the things that we have been traveling around and talking about over the past few weeks, months, has been our work with newsrooms on how they can use AI. For those of you who don't follow Fathm on LinkedIn, you should. You can for regular updates. But for context, we have since about September 2024, I counted the other day, I asked AI to help me count. We've worked with, I think, at least 235 newsrooms.
Wow. Okay.
In about 40 countries. The AI was less sure on how many countries. I think it's 40.
I know that we've worked with 140 something on just one program that we've done. So, yeah.
So we've run multiple programs in a really global setting. So from Southeast Asia, South Asia, Australia, New Zealand. We've worked with a couple of newsrooms in the Middle East and Africa. We've worked with a lot of newsrooms in Europe. We've worked with newsrooms in Latin America and in North America. So that's most of the globe fairly well covered.
And it's important to say that that work with the newsrooms has also, in many occasions, been a collaboration with OpenAI and with Google and DeepMind, and with associated with journalism support organizations and associations. So we've had quite a lot of exposure to different types of organizations, of all different size organizations in most parts of the world.
Yes.
And we've got the data now, and we've started to crunch it and take lessons from it.
To try and see over time, are there any trends in what newsrooms are doing, what challenges they're facing, what are the opportunities they're identifying, and then, also to kind of look ahead a little bit to think about, where are we now? We're in a very different world in 2026, middle of 2026 to when we started in 2024. So what does the future look like a little bit?
Yeah, so today we're going to drill down into some of that data, peppered with some anecdotes about things that we've seen, because we've been on the road delivering with newsrooms. We work with a team who are coaching, and so we're getting feedback from that based on kind of individual challenges and needs. And I think, we're going to try and kind of tease out things that will be of interest to people within the industry and people outside who might not really understand how AI is being used. Because I think the immediate reaction, and there's quite a lot of research now being done, which is, I don't want my news organization to use AI in news. Probably what they mean is in the editorial output. But what we've seen is that AI embedded in an organization is not just about editorial output. In fact, it's about almost everything else except for the editorial output. And we've talked about humanity in the loop before. I think, there's we need to kind of break open this idea that all newsrooms are focused on replacing journalists to write stories.
Yeah, and I think also to remember that newsrooms, media houses, broadcasters, fundamentally they're organizations, and they're organizations with often a unique mission or focus, but they're organizations, it's teams of people working together to try and pursue something. Many organizations have an editorial-like function where they're trying to communicate important information to audiences in a way that protects their brand and protects the authority that they have. So newsrooms are not unique in that sense, and we think maybe there's some lessons that can apply outside of news, hopefully.
So why don't we get specific? Because we've got the data, we've spoken to the organizations about the kinds of change that they can make. I think, actually, before we get specific, I think let's talk about a trend in terms of prototyping. Because when we started this work about 2 years ago, AI was prototyping.
Right. So if we cast our minds back, September 2024, I think we were using maybe GPT-4. I think was the maybe just
and Sora and video generation had not been invented
was
yet.
not
that we'd seen.
there. I think it might have been Gemini 2 at the time, and I think what we were seeing at that stage was that, so we worked with Newsrooms over a period of 3 months, and it would take really 3 months for Newsrooms to get to the point at which they had a prototype, probably an internal prototype, that they were ready to test with their teams. If you fast forward to even just a year later, so looking at September to December 2025, we were seeing Newsrooms, even small local Newsrooms, able to build a testable prototype in about a day and a half, going through a very similar process, but much, much more quickly. So this is the rise of tools like Google's AI Studio or Lovable, or there's any number of kind of no-code prototype development apps now.
But we should remind people, because it's really easy to forget with the pace of change, that even like non-technical people creating prototypes 2 years ago was a novel thing. Like that was not something that anyone had done before.
True.
And it took that process out of the development teams and into the newsroom. And it meant people, and I've not really seen journalists adopt a technology so seamlessly before. It didn't require that much pushing. For some people it required pushing, but for others there was this kind of hunger, because it almost felt like the inability to experiment with development stuff, like dev stuff, was holding people back, and now they weren't held back. So in 2 years we've seen the speed of prototyping change, but we've also seen that kind of speed that people come round to trying technology.
The kind of accessibility to the more, what seemed like a more technical process. If anything, actually, I think we've seen developers struggling more with AI than the journalists and editors and managers. And we can get into the weeds of why that might be. But people. So I mean, now we're in 2026. You can spin up a prototype very quickly, and you can get to the stage of kind of public audience-facing launch also very quickly. But there's another challenge that we see, which is, okay, I might be able to build a tool really quickly. How do I get my colleagues using it?
Yeah. There's the adoption, because there are people who are excited in the newsrooms, the people that were unshackled once they could get their hands on testing things out. They're the champions, right? They're the AI champions, ambassadors, super users, whatever you want to call them in the newsroom. But they have to bring along their colleagues, and people who don't understand something are resist it, and they won't admit that they don't understand it. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to use it, but by not being able to speak in plain language about what their challenges are, they might feel nervous about it. So in the early days of our work, and I say early days like 2 years ago, when it came to kind of scalable AI adoption, it was really important to find kind of proof of concept case studies. So the work that we set out doing was actually, what is the one intervention that you can make in your organization that will start to drive change and show
kind of unlock something deeper? Yeah.
And the organizations that we work with, they did things kind of across the spectrum and came out with these use cases. So I'm going to fire off a few of these, because I think that it's really useful, and I think it's useful to see that a lot of it is quite similar across the world, even though the ecosystems are quite different. So the first area was, let's think about ROI when it comes to the impact of using AI in your newsroom or news organization. And that can be split into different things. So operational efficiency, time saved, is a useful metric for some people. So one of the newsrooms that we worked with in Puerto Rico, they were doing fully automating something to do with their podcast pipeline and reducing the production workflow. They reduced that workflow from 1.5 hours to 5 minutes.
Amazing.
Like that, and they were able to use that. Similarly, an organization in Ecuador automated their audio processing workflows and reduced that processing time from 2 hours to 15 minutes. A organization in India deployed an AI SEO assistant that reduced manual SEO formatting by 60%. In Scotland, an organization in Scotland, they changed their workflows around evergreen content. They realized that everyone was tagging all content as evergreen content, which was not particularly useful. But that tagging process was 18 different steps. And now, or when we spoke to them, they reduced it down to 5. I suspect it's even fewer than that. So operational efficiency, time saved, clear indicator, clear use case wins. And we know that for some of these specific ones, that was the right intervention that caused management to have buy-in in their process, in their organization. And some of these organizations said that they had senior stakeholders who were very skeptical, and now all of those stakeholders are very engaged in the process and have expanded the kind of remit of the team,
because they can see a kind of measurable impact. I think is also my experience of working with the teams working on those efficiencies. Yes, management kind of sits up and listens, but it's also easier for the people who are having to run those very laborious manual tasks before. There's not a lot of resistance when you go to somebody and say, you spent 2 hours tagging content in the CMS, you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
That person is unlikely to say, no, actually, that's a core part of my job. So it's a way of also, I guess, bringing along colleagues in a way that's not kind of threatening or doesn't feel scary.
There was one organization that actually used this process to work out where our AI had its limits and to look at that ROI. And I think it was a tagging exercise. It was in India. I can't remember the exact use case, but they did the analysis to work out the cost and time that it would take AI to do this process, and the cost and time of the 2 people that are employed to do it at the moment. And it came out cheaper to still use the people. And therefore they knew that they were going to park that and look at that later and say, okay, at one point soon there might be a tipping point where we do deploy the AI for this, but at the moment it's better placed by using real people that already work for us to do this. And I think that I was quite proud standing in that room, hearing people be able to make that analysis and make it with confidence, because it's not about losing people. It's about really working out where that value is. Audience growth. So that's the next area. One organization in Spain, they were able to say that audience testing revealed that their AI-generated historical context boxes, very specific, directly improved article retention rates. So they were able to show that there was a real impact on their audience. AI-powered content recommendation models significantly outperformed generic popularity-based recommendations for an organization we worked with in Taiwan. So the audience growth element is there. The numbers are not as solid, although in India, like Google Discover actually is something that we see in Asia, especially as a major source of traffic. An Indian news organization said that their AI prototype generated a 17% uplift in Google Discover visibility for their pilot articles where they were using AI SEO assistance to do that.
So that's potential for discoverability, so bigger audiences, and potential and kind of measurable impact on, once you've got those audiences on your articles, keeping them there longer. I think there was one Indian newsroom that I was talking to who did something similar. They built a very nice feature that helped audiences kind of drill down into bits of the story that they were interested in. They sort of anecdotally talked about a 30% increase in time spent on page and similar increases in scroll depth. So you can get more audiences in if you're smart, and maybe you can keep audiences on the page longer. The ROI implication is that if you can then monetize those audiences successfully, then that should be more R in the ROI, I guess.
So continuing ROI, direct cost reductions and improved accuracy. Another different organization in India. We worked with, I don't know, almost 40 organizations in India. So there's a lot of examples there. And the scale in India is just massive. So that's why the numbers are quite important to look at. One organization optimized their infrastructure by batching API requests for their adaptive story widget, and that reduced their token costs by 38%. So they were able to save on that spend by optimizing their infrastructure.
I think that focus on token cost is one that we didn't see very early, but now has become really important, especially if you're operating at a kind of an Indian newsrooms scale where your audience could be in the tens or hundreds of millions of people. And your staff might be probably thousands or tens of thousands of people. How efficiently you're using your tokens and which models are you using? It's not. It's often not smart to be using the most capable model because it's going to be expensive and slow. All of the platforms now have some version of mini or nano models, which are quick and like orders of magnitude cheaper, which have real implications on the cost side once you start to kind of scale this stuff up.
Just one more stat again from a big Indian organization. Their audience prediction engine that they built as part of our work with them achieved 64% prediction precision, which beat the human editor baseline of 52%. And so their real-time data insight tool then brought the numerical error rates down to just 3.8%. So I really like it when people share these statistics because it makes our job easier to kind of communicate. None of these things that we've talked about here are editorial like output generated by AI. It's using AI for different ways of achieving return on investment and letting the journalists and news gatherers do what they do best. That's it for the statistics. But what I also tried to do was pull in the data in terms of what makes adoption hard.
Yes.
And try to look at themes across. And I think between us, we've been in every region where we've been delivering this work. And I think we would see the same thing. So first lesson is the post-launch crash and shiny object syndrome. Last year, everyone got excited about AI. They got to build something brand new. It was super shiny. It started to show ROI, but then AI tools and the LLMs improved, and you could do new things with these new models that you couldn't do before, and it made that next thing even shinier.
Right.
And so it was this kind of version 2, V2 problem, whether you couldn't, the V2 myth, I think is what we started to call it, that instead of doing the hard, unglamorous work of refining version 1 to fix its flaws, you look at version 2.
You move on.
Or you can't get to version 2 because you move on.
Yeah, and I think in general, the kind of sustaining the momentum can be really challenging. You know, when you come through a program of intense kind of focus and progress, and then you have to go back to your organization. And I think this is especially a challenge for bigger organizations, and this has been an interesting thing that I've observed, which is if you look back at sort of, I don't know, even 2019, it was really hard for small newsrooms to do anything with AI. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the technical expertise. Big newsrooms were doing interesting things. Now you kind of see that inverted, where small newsrooms can prototype very quickly. They can get a small team of people on board and aligned and all working in the same direction. Bigger newsrooms, you've got to convince just a lot more people of the where you're going and why you're going there. And then if you layer on top that token cost that we just talked about, it can become I think it's now maybe more difficult for bigger newsrooms to adopt and scale AI than it is for smaller.
And that is actually the second point, which is one of the challenges for adoption is union resistance and fear of replacement, and what management in the bigger organizations need to do to say, actually, AI is not a replacer. It's an assistant. It's something that will remove the drudgery of repetitive tasks and actually go out and be journalists and don't have to worry about those repetitive tasks.
And I think about finding, I was speaking to somebody in a newsroom that we've been working with who works in a very traditional role in a very traditional organization, where a creative recent use of AI, the words that she used it's given me actually a new sense of meaning. It's given me sort of new opportunities. I can work with more things and apply my skills to more things, which is the first time I've kind of heard that framing of it, and it was quite unexpected. So I think it can sound a little bit blasé to say, oh, it's about augmentation and not automation, but newsrooms need journalists, newsrooms need editors. I think the future value of news is very much in that kind of verification and the reliability of the data and the content. So we need to invest in that, and hopefully some of these ROI and the efficiency piece can free up resources to allow for that investment that's needed.
Yeah. I completely agree. Some other completely different challenges, though, the kind of one size fits all, or assuming that everyone works in the same way. So one of the newsrooms specifically, but it was common across a lot of them, said that everyone has different meanings or definitions when it comes to what repurposing of content means.
Interesting.
And so, that it can even mean something for one team and not another, and how you use AI and the rules around that. And then obviously, like, internal infrastructure was a barrier. Like, are you able to do that? Do you have enough? Do you have the right internal APIs to do the integrations that you want to do? Those were the challenges. Themes that are working in newsrooms. The first one is agentic workflows over chatbots. I think we know that this is something that comes up a lot, that we've moved beyond chatbots, and actually it's about kind of these multi-agent architectures within organizations, which sounds scary. It sounds much more complex than it actually is. What we mean by agentic workflows over chatbots are a system that connects a whole load of workflows done by AI together to create something bigger. Like one of our partners in these programs built a live revenue dashboard, or scraping leads for stories. That happens in the background and then feeds into a CMS. So it's basically, I guess, agentic workflows mean you're over chatbots, where we're saying, like, you're not asking your interface with whether it's Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT, you're not asking it to do something. You're setting things up that are working away in the background and then feed into your workflow when you want it. Is that an okay way of describing it?
Yeah, I think so. It's about how you use AI outside of that chat interface, which I think is relies on some level of technical integration into CMSs and the spaces that people are working, but it kind of gets you out of that sort of, how are you today? Yes, I'm going to type my prompt in here.
Yeah, it's AI not being initiated by a prompt. It's AI working in the background for things that you've set up ahead of time, and will just keep doing their work. They don't need to go to sleep.
Exactly.
They will just keep doing it. Do you have Do you have experience of running your own agentic system?
I have a monitoring agent. That one of the things that we work on is climate journalism. We'll talk about that in future podcasts. I have a monitoring agent that is going out and looking to pull in all of the most kind of creative and compelling climate stories. Usually, I think it usually sends me an email once a week. So it's very much. So I think, background research is one really common use case for agents. There are others around that point you raised around connecting data coming from multiple places and kind of pulling it all into one place.
We are looking. I don't personally have agentic workflows in whirring away in the background for me, but we are looking at like this data that we're looking at here. We're trying to work out how we collect data in a way that's a bit more real time in our day-to-day work, so that it's not a case of producing a report as and when. Like it's already there.
Yes.
Just a few final things on kind of what's working high level. Organizations like slashing commodity reporting, or like automating the boring stuff that people need to report, like just the daily news cycle churn, scraping counts of websites, looking at press releases, automatically drafting updates into Slack for an editor to approve, or meeting notes, or that frees up expensive human talent and creative talent. That means that you can do high impact community reporting. Youth first content transformation. Basically, AI is good at format shifting. So format shifting is something that's working.
Dare I say liquid content?
Liquid content. You can say liquid content.
We need a buzzword alarm.
We do, yeah. So I guess liquid content is working. And then I think this data has started to show us what people should be doing now. Like if you are leading a media organization that has got a news element or information element to it, you need to get your data in order. Data is number one thing.
How you structure your content, how you structure your audience data, how you expose that to different agents, different services, where your APIs sit, and how you can kind of...
Yeah, that's the second one. Build an API culture.
API culture, wow. Okay. What does the API culture mean?
It means that think about your workflows and your agents in terms of what access to data they need and how you can utilize that.
API, for listeners who are not developers or perhaps technical, means application programming interface, and is basically how two platforms or systems can talk to one another. It's not an AI specific term. If you ever used a tool like Zapier in the past, it's how those kind of, or if this then that was the first one of these. If I send an email, then put a notification into Slack. That's an API that sits between Gmail and Slack. Those become really important as soon as you start to think about how AI and agents can kind of link between systems, because each system needs its own API. Using the development tools available to us is also much easier to set up and build APIs that can work.
So leads us into the next one, conveniently, which is establish a centralized sandbox or hub for experimentation in your organization. This is to eliminate shadow IT. So by shadow IT, we mean IT that is being used without your knowledge by people on your team. Often happens because they're not sure if they're allowed to use it. They found something that they need to test, but actually having a process for exposing new tools, understanding what people are using, and letting people use something in a safe environment is something that needs to happen in order for progress to happen. And then the very final thing in terms of kind of takeaways is that governance is an enabler and not a blocker. So organizations who need to get your house in order when it comes to your paperwork and your rules for how AI is deployed in your organization by individuals and at organizational level. Because actually, the organizations that we've spoken to about this, they say that once they had got that in place, they were able to do so much more because they had their rules for how they were able to engage and do things.
Yeah, and I think those things are connected, right? The sandbox where people can experiment, and the governance and the policy, which are the guardrails on that. This is one thing that we see as a constraint on adoption. People basically not even trying something because they're not sure if this is allowed or if that's allowed, and they don't have a sandbox to play in, and they don't have a clear policy framework, or maybe the policy framework's not been explained to them or communicated enough, so they just kind of shy away altogether.
An example of how we use that in our day-to-day work, we have said to our team, these are the tools that we've got. You can experiment as much as you like because we've got enterprise accounts. Please do not go to a free account and put in our stuff because we don't know what's going to happen to that. But here is a safe place for you to do that, and we encourage you to test it out. And we've got people building custom gems or custom GPTs, which are kind of little things that they've set up that create a chatbot for a specific purpose. And it's a really great way of encouraging that experimentation, but we know that it's safe. And we've said, we don't mind if you want to use something else. Come and ask us about it and we'll explore it and do some due diligence on it. That's absolutely the right way to do it. And we're a small organization, but we see that same kind of methodology play out in the bigger organizations. And those are the ones that really get to fly with it.
Yes. They can, once you've got some of these big infrastructure pieces, you can really do some interesting things, and you can see patterns across bigger organizations. Quite exciting.
Thank you very much for listening to another episode of The Signal. Follow our show notes where we're going to put as much of this as possible in there in terms of things that we've presented and takeaways from the work that we've done. And join us next time.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to The Signal. For more information on who we are, what we're doing, as well as what we're thinking about and who we're talking to, subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get all of the show notes where we're going to be sharing more information about what we've been talking about today. We do want to hear from you, so please leave us a comment and share your thoughts and suggestions. You can do that on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Please like and subscribe.